Everyone, I'm very excited for this week's live office hours. As always, I'm here to help you guys as much as I possibly can with whatever you need in your real estate investing journey. As a quick recap, I'm Michael Manatskanian. I've bought over $25 million of real estate and became financially free before 30 years old, all thanks to real estate investing. I'm not going to just pretend like it was just rental properties itself was the thing. It took a lot of personal finance. It took a lot of, I'd never made over six figures as I was building my portfolio. And the big thing there was just like savings, right? Like you can make a bunch of money and it's meaningless if you don't save any of it. And you can make less money. If you save it, you're in a better position. And then when it's time to invest, you choose how you're going to do it. And for me, started the stock market route, but it was really real estate investing that made the most mathematical sense to be able to achieve my goals way more quickly. And then doing what I call super investing, which is not just investing using your own money, but doing so with a lot more leverage in place, raising capital, creative finance, co-living, right? So creative finance allows you to buy better deals with lower interest rates and lower down payments, meaning you get better, more scalability and just better deals. Co-living allows me to take the same exact property that would make maybe $100 a month and allow it to make me thousands of dollars a month for one single property. And the capital raising eliminates the biggest bottleneck, which is for most people, you'll need, if you want to buy 10 properties, you'll probably need $1 million or more dollars. Well, most people can't earn and save that much money. And I definitely couldn't while I was active duty military. So creative capital raising allowed me to scale much more quickly and effectively and build a portfolio that made the most sense for me. So with all that being said, if you guys need any help with anything, I'm here to answer all of your questions. I do have a few questions that were already submitted to me, both focused on basically my investment strategy as well as my favorite way to do co-living. This is very timely considering, there's a variety of ways to do co-living. And during our live weekly office hours last week, someone was in a situation, our guest was in a situation where he was deep into a BRRRR deal. You buy it with a hard money loan or private money, you renovate it, and then you rent it out and you refinance it to pull all your money back out. That sounds great in theory, and that's why people educate and sell a bunch of courses around it. But the reality of it is it's not that easy, and there's a lot of risk involved. With that being said, it's very timely that the question that was asked was, okay, if I don't like BRRRR, and I do BRRRR sometimes, it has got to make a lot of sense for me to do so. And I'm probably more experienced than a lot of you guys doing BRRRR. So, I'll explain why I do and don't like that. It's a good strategy, but it also has a lot of risk. So I'll explain why I do my favorite investing strategy and why I recommend the vast majority of you to do the same thing, especially if you're doing your first, 2, 3, 4, 5 deals or your first out-of-state deal. So you can maximize your returns, maximize your speed to cash flow, and minimize your risk, because that's so huge when you're starting out. You want to minimize risks that can derail your entire path. And especially if you're raising capital, it's just as important to make sure, it's even more important to make sure you're not putting other people's money at risk by doing something that you may not be prepared for at that moment. And then we'll talk about co-living, right? So co-living and investment strategy. And then if you guys have any additional questions throughout, please drop them in. I'm happy to answer them. If I need to pull someone up live because you have something custom, deal analysis, capital raising, co-living, I don't really care, whatever it is, I'm happy to answer that for you. So to get started, the first question was, let's see. What is my favorite co-living investment strategy? All right. I'll put the word co-living in there. All right. So let's pop that up. So what is my favorite co-living investment strategy? That's a great question. For those of you who are looking to buy and hold real estate, I have an entire community called the Co-Living Freedom Community. And you can come in, it's a monthly subscription. You cancel anytime, you get all the tools, resources, all that good stuff. If it's not the right fit, keep it all. But the idea there is I literally lay this out step by step for you. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and just freestyle talking about it, I'm going to go pull up some of those resources right now and share that, because that's perfect. That's a perfect way to educate on it, because this thing is laid out. I'm an engineer by trade. So step-by-step process, like sequential, right? Laying it all out is very important to me. And that's how my education is taught. That's how I teach this kind of stuff, because it's the easiest way for me to the way I like to learn and the way I like to understand it. I think a lot of other people feel like that is missing. They get little pieces of information here and there, but no one's putting it well into a straight, organized fashion that is like learn, do, learn, do, learn, do. So let's go into that right now, and I'll show you what literally, and we'll just go through that training together. I'll share my screen. So if you're not already in my free real estate freedom roadmap community, you are missing out. Definitely hop in. It's absolutely free. It's there's tons of free trainings in there, and laying out financial freedom, what the overall journey looks like, some personal finance stuff, the understanding of real estate investing as a whole, plus deal analysis. We got free tools in there like calculators and all that stuff. Bird dogging, co-living beginner's guide, and the paid monthly co-living freedom community is right here. So for most of you, it'll look like this. And then you got to unlock it, right? Well, I don't have to unlock it. It's there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a training in here for you guys. So basically, let's go. It's going to be under co-living strategy deep dive as part of it. This is actually pretty much where it's going to be. But instead of going through a video, I'm just going to go to the slides that I already have for that question, basically. So here we go. The core strategies to owning co-living, right? I think there are 4 core ways that you can own co-living properties. The 4 ways, quite literally, here, let me, you can either buy a property that is like already, this is my favorite strategy. I'm telling you right now, my favorite strategy is to buy a property that is ready for a new long-term tenant or whatever. And I'm buying a property that's already in great condition. And then I convert it to co-living, for example, by taking offices, living rooms, all that kind of stuff, and converting them to additional bedrooms. Sometimes we'll convert garages. Basically what we're doing is we're taking a 5-bed, 3-bath house that's 2,500 square feet, and we're taking that extra dining room, it's got a bonus living room, it's got an office, all these things, and we're converting them into additional bedrooms to get it to be 7 to 10 bedrooms. That I prefer this because you have the least amount of renovation costs, which means you also have the least amount of risk. If you are only adding a couple non-load bearing walls to build bedrooms, it's going to cost you $3,000 to $6,000 per room. So even if you're off by a little bit, it's not going to be a substantial issue. And this allows me to buy lots of properties that are creatively financed. So this is kind of a big part of my overall investing strategy, is combining the way I like to renovate and convert to co-living to the way that I could find the best deals to do that. So if you're looking for something that is advantageous for creative financing and requires the least amount of money into the deal, it's the turnkey property, just a standard house. You go on Zillow right now. I could literally show you how to do it in like 5 seconds and convert that into co-living. Actually, I am going to show you that right now. So I'm literally going to go on Zillow right now. All right. And we're going to go, we can do Dallas. That's fine. Dallas, Texas. This is also laid out in much clearer detail in the co-living community. But literally all I'm doing, saying 4-bed, 2-bath. I don't need coming soon. Just give me properties that are there. Give me at least 2,000 square feet. There's a ton of them. Let's say we don't want it to be above 500,000. And you don't want super like cheap, like, properties that need a lot of renovations. And there are 163 results here, right? And then you can research which zip codes make the most sense for you or whatever. But basically, I'm just looking for properties. Honestly, I prefer 3 bedrooms if possible. Let's see how many of those there are. Man, it's a bit slow, but all right, there's 91 results for 4-bedroom, 3-bath. So I'm looking for something. Let's just say this one. Let's go even bigger square footage, because you got to review the floor plan. You got to do all those things. I'm not going to go into the weeds of that. I'm going to just show you, what am I talking about? Like, I'm looking for a property that basically looks like this. And then I'm looking to buy something that looks like this. Oh, no HOA. We don't like HOAs for co-living. Don't include 55 plus communities. Where's my HOA language? HOA. There it is. No HOA. Or is it no HOA at all? Yeah, no HOA. Cool. Because Texas does have a decent amount. All right, cool. That property is perfect. So I'm looking for a property just like this. Like this one I say turnkey. Like someone is selling it on the market or trying to sell it on the market. It's nice condition. I don't have to go and like demolish the house entirely, which is going to take more time, cost me more money. I don't want to do those full renovations. I don't want to do those. And if I do, I buy those properties cash. And there's got to be a lot of equity. It's got to be a huge discount. This is way better if you're trying to buy and hold real estate and maximize your cash flow, how much you get with the least amount of money in, and then get your cash flow quickly because you're not spending a bunch of time and energy renovating something completely. And the risk is much lower when you're not doing that much renovations. Like you don't have the concern of the risk of renovations. So I'm looking at something like this, perfect. Like I don't mind cosmetic. If I got to fix some paint, if I got to fix some flooring, fine. Like I'm looking at rooms like this and saying, where is this located? This looks like the living room actually. Can these become bedrooms? Maybe it'd be a kind of awkward, but this literally could be 2 bedrooms and a hallway depending on how wide this is. Like that's the kind of stuff I'm doing as much as possible. Let's see what else is there. Cool, got the kitchen, whatever. This looks like someone flipped this house is what this looks like. Let's see if I got a floor plan. All right, we don't have a floor plan, but this is my favorite way to buy properties for co-living. I'm looking for an already renovated property or like at least in good enough condition. Like I said, I don't mind doing minor cosmetic renovations, flooring, paint, whatever, but I'm not trying to like change anything massively. And the only structural change I'm doing is I'm adding non-load bearing walls. I'm not removing anything. I'm just adding walls that literally are like not going to massively impact the property. It's lower cost, way quicker to do so. And it's easy to turn a property back into its regular condition when it's time to sell it in the future if you choose to do so. I won't get into the weeds of that. I explain it in extreme detail in the co-living community, why I go that route and exactly why I consider it and how this impacts the exit, the cost, the numbers, all that stuff. This is my favorite way to buy properties, without a doubt. This is the best way. And then I don't just buy these typically on market as a traditional property, like through traditional financing, through a new loan, like a DSCR loan or whatever. I do it through creative financing, right? That's the next step. But my favorite way to buy co-living deals is buying something that's fairly turnkey, needs minimal cosmetic renovations, and then just add a few doors or walls or closets to turn it from 4 or 5 bedrooms into 7+. The other strategies are major renovations to co-living. So basically, you are taking a property that's typically very distressed, ideally, so that you're buying at a discount, and then you're completely like gutting it and fully renovating it. The advantage there is you have a very new property, right? And in theory, if you bought it right, you bought it at a discount, it might have made it conducive for you to be able to do the BRRRR strategy and pull some, if not all of your money out. However, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch my video from last week where we did the live office hours. And there's just, all I've got to worry about here is minimal renovations. If a $20,000 renovation budget goes 10% over, 20% over, what is that? That's $4,000 over budget. That's not going to kill most people. If you're trying to buy and hold real estate, under $5,000, under $10,000, even under $20,000 being off is not ideal, but it should not kill your entire investing journey. Being 10% off on a $200,000 renovation, that is 20. Being 20% off or it taking 2-3 more months longer and you had to finance this thing with hard money or private money, so it's compounding interest. Like, no, like that is how people set themselves up for massive failure because of the enticing reward that's portrayed. But the reality of it is you're not just doing minimal renovations. There's a lot of risk of the renovations not being right, your approximations for how long it'll take, your approximations for what the property will be worth after, the financing you have to refinance into. You can't even do this creatively because there's no point of putting all this money in on a creative deal because it stays stuck in the deal. This doesn't make any sense for the way that I do it, and I think it's too much risk for the vast majority to do it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I went an hour and a half in extreme detail last week with a real example with someone literally dealing with this right now, gave him a roadmap that can hopefully help him out of it, but it's a tough situation, quite honestly. Overall, it's a good rental property. It's going to be a good rental for him in the end, but the amount of work, time, effort, risk, and lost money during this period was not worth it, when at the same time I could buy 2 to 4 of these very quickly. That's a big part too, is the scalability. Time and effort that goes into here means I could do 2, 3, 4 times as many deals this way. New build co-living is different than a major renovation, because instead of taking an existing house, let's see if I can actually find something here to show you what I'm talking about. How would I find that? I think the best way to consider it is to go very low price and see if I can find something that's in very bad condition. Yeah, usually you don't see as many of those up here. Let's be less restrictive. And just because it's cheaper doesn't mean that's the case. Like, I can go on Investor Lift or other platforms that sell properties cash, or I can type in like investor special or whatever. But I want you to see like what it looks like. This is not handy homeowner. This one's not, that it's not terrible at all. It's not turnkey like the other one, but like this would actually be a cosmetic renovation for me. I don't mind upgrading countertops and appliances and little things like that. I just don't want to like, okay, so like the bathroom, would need to be remodeled. A lot of drywall stuff needs to get remodeled. So, okay, there is more renovations here. Like, this is closer to that. You may not need to do a full gut rehab, but this is closer to that. Another option that people do for these full gut renovations is they'll take something that's smaller and completely reconfigure it, right? Like, it's 1,500, 1,700 square feet, completely reconfigure it for co-living, which then really minimizes their ability to exit the property in the future. So they got to do a full, it's just like an awkward property. Like, who's going to want to buy that in the future besides an investor? I'm not a fan. All right. New build is different. New build is a little trendy. It's good if you know what you're doing and you understand the issues with it, which is it's going to take a lot longer, and there are risks, and there is bad financing for co-living, and you have to find the land. You have to do way more work to be able to make one of these things work. And a lot of money gets stuck in the deal because you cannot creatively finance it. So you have more money stuck in the deal to buy the land, to renovate, like to create the structure. You might be able to get some long-term debt, but you could keep that money in a lot longer. And usually it doesn't make a lot of sense long-term. There's pros to it. Do not get me wrong. There are pros to new builds. I think new build for co-living, creating a 10-bedroom, 10-bath is not necessarily ideal unless you plan on keeping that indefinitely, because you have very limited people you can sell it to outside of investors. What I've done for new builds, and what we're going to do more of, is taking a duplex, building a brand new duplex that's 5-bedroom, 5-bath, or 5-bedroom, 3-bath, 2 of them that collectively are 10-bedroom, 3-bath, or 10-bedroom, 10-bath, whatever. That is much better, because that is much better to sell than trying to sell a 10-bedroom, 10-bath house, because there's a very limited buyer pool who would want to buy that. And the best buyers are always homeowners, people who want to live in the house. No one wants your 10-bedroom, 10-bath house. Like, it's very limiting in your ability to exit. And when you buy real estate, you should always consider the entry, the acquisition, the cash flow you generate during, the appreciation, all that other stuff, and the exit. Okay, so you got to consider all 3 of those. That's where this one's really limiting, and it takes forever to finally get some money on it. You can also buy someone else's existing co-living. There are a variety of ways to do so, and one of those ways is like Pad Split, the platform I use. Also allows you to just buy other people's properties, or I've sold properties as well that were existing co-living. Like, sometimes someone's already done it and they're just selling it, typically to another investor. You can buy those, but the downside is typically if someone did all the other work, they've squeezed a lot of the juice out, and you're getting lesser returns than if you just did it yourself, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm not gonna go into the pros and cons. That's what the whole training is for, just to give you an example. But this table basically compares them. This is my opinion. These are based on my numbers, my opinions, and all that kind of stuff. The reason why I love turnkey conversions is how quickly, within less than 60 days, we can be cash flow positive if there's minimal renovations to do. It takes us less than 30 days to renovate, less than 2 weeks to furnish, less than 2 weeks to get this thing listed and tenants starting to move in. As opposed to if I'm building something brand new, it could take 18 plus months just to finish the renovations, and the whole time is being financed at higher interest. Same with the full gut renovation. Existing co-living is the fastest, it's immediate, but you've already squeezed a lot of the juice, is the downside. The risk level, right, of taking over someone's existing co-living is lower than if you're doing a turnkey conversion, But like I said, the big risk is the renovation. How long will it take you? Like the difference in risk. They all have risk that the income will not meet the expenses and all that stuff, right? But the risk comparison between them is that existing co-living, you already have it. There's no more renovations, no more furnishing, as long as as long as they didn't screw over the property. But with a turnkey conversion, there is risk, right? You're adding walls, you're doing renovations. That's going to take time. It's going to cost money. The risk there is that it could cost more money or take longer. But like I gave you the example of $20,000, $30,000, being 10, 20% off is not the end of the world. Not ideal, but it's not the end of the world versus being hundreds of thousands of dollars of renovations and being 10, 20% off of those. The value add potential, how much you can increase the value of a property. Well, obviously, if you're doing a full gut renovation or building brand new, you're adding a lot of value. The problem is when I've seen people do these and they're raising money, they don't buy the properties at enough of a discount or do the renovations at a low enough cost that the property is actually worth something more than all their money in. Look at the example from last week. Literally, you do all this work and your property is worth no more than what it was before once you account for all your all-in costs. Let me phrase that better. If you added $100,000, if it went from $200,000 to $300,000 value, but it cost you $100,000 to get there and you bought it at $200,000, well, the net equity is nothing. So the value add that you did was negated by the amount of money you had to invest to get it to that point. There is some benefit of adding value to turnkey conversions, right? Like I said, the flooring, like those are the things that add a lot of value, right? The cosmetic stuff, the flooring, the paint, and all that kind of stuff. It's minimal value add, but you're not buying it to add a bunch of value for a rental property. You're doing it because you want to get as much cash flow as you can with the least amount of money invested in the deal. That's the big thing there. Design control, obviously, if you're doing a full renovation or new build, you can control that entirely, what it's going to look like. While you're more limited with turnkey conversions, what you're doing less is trying to redesign the property entirely. You're just choosing from the plethora of deals out there which ones you want to do, which ones are conducive to your management strategy. Obviously, it's existing co-living. It is what it is, right? It's typically they've already extracted or added all the rooms they possibly can. This is one of the biggest ones for me is scalability. Which ones allow me to buy it effectively and have really high returns that allow me to quickly get those returns so that I can do a lot of these deals at one time. I guess in theory, scalability, existing co-living would work here, except for typically the only way to buy existing co-living, unless it's the rare creatively financed sale, is a new DSCR loan. Like you have to take out a new loan, so that makes it less scalable because that process takes longer and is more cumbersome than the creative financing available for just a general turnkey property that you choose instead of to long-term rent. You choose to do co-living, right? You just take whatever the property was, right? You just take whatever the property was. I mean, not this one, but you just take it if it's creative. And instead of renting as long-term, you rent it out as a co-living instead because you convert it for that. In my opinion, turnkey conversions are ideal for people who are serious about scaling. If you're trying to buy 3, 4, 5+ properties and actually build a portfolio that allows you to be financially free in a reasonable time frame with less risk, turnkey conversions are the way to go. There's less risk of things going wrong. There's so many investment opportunities out there if you know what you're looking for and how to find them. And the conversion is faster. Like I said, it's lower risk, it's faster. So then you're able to get your money quicker and really minimize your downside, right? Minimize the risk of things going really wrong, destroying your journey. Existing co-living is the easiest way to get co-living. And that makes a lot of sense for people who want to be more passive or out of state. But the issue there is that you're getting, instead of getting much higher returns, you're getting much lower returns. And you're typically putting more money in and primarily have to do traditional financing. The reason for that is if someone's selling something that's a good co-living deal, but they're selling it, they're typically doing that to get their money out to use elsewhere. Those people are not selling great properties just for the heck of it, right? They're great co-living investments for the heck of it. They're selling it to get the money out to invest it somewhere else. So either they don't think it's a good investment, which is why they're selling it, or they want to get their money out. So then they're not going to be open to creative unless you give them all their money up front, all their equity up front. Full gut renovations can be great, right? Like I said, I have it in my tool belt. It is one of the ways that I buy deals. It can be great, but it has a lot more risk. And I think it's best for those that have fix and flip experience, a lot of local market knowledge and resources to be able to do this successfully and make it work. I still do not think it is as scalable as a turnkey conversion, because I could do, in the time that I could oversee one of these and the risk involved and all that, I could do multiple turnkey conversions, make more money with less money in total. So then why would I do this? I rarely do this, but the advantage is I get to keep 100% of the ownership if it's done perfectly, right? As opposed to raising money and giving up some of the ownership, because you're going to need money for these, right? And I raise the money for my deals. New builds, I just put long-term developers. It just depends on what your goal is. There is value there. It's just a different type of investor. And once again, long-term developers, I think, are more of the end goal in the experience level, because even an experienced flip is very different than long-term development, because you have permit delays and you have all these other things that you need to account for. So you need even more experience and knowledge than what you would need as a full gut renovator or fix and flipper. Definitely a lot more than just buying a property and adding some non-load bearing walls. There we go. Turnkey conversions hit the sweet spot of cash flow, speed, and scalability. You minimize major rehab risk while still boosting income through additional rooms. The key is knowing how to find and analyze the right properties. Like, that's what you have to get really good at. But that's fundamental for any of these strategies. You have to know what you're looking for and then how to effectively analyze, is the income going to exceed my expenses each and every month? The advantage with a turnkey conversion, especially creatively financed or even a new loan, is you know what that debt is. If you're doing a full gut renovation, you don't know what the new debt payments will be at the end, because you need to take out a new loan at the end. So interest rates can change, the value of the property and how much loan a bank's willing to give you at that point will change. New build, same thing. You have a rough idea, but you don't know that. So that's another variable, not just the renovation, the timeline, all that stuff during that process, but it's also getting the long-term debt is also a big variable. So it makes it even harder, not just to analyze the amount of money in and the risks up front, but also the likelihood of generating enough income to cover whatever the expense is, because it's not clearly defined at that point. All right. I go into it. All right, whatever. I go into it and explain all that for you. Benefits, accessibility, risk minimization, opportunities for creative financing, higher cash on cash return. Let's stop that for a second. Are there any questions about this very specific thing before I go into what are my favorite ways to buy co-living? Which, right, I don't even know. It kind of almost sounds like the same question, but I'll talk about the different strategies to actually finance and acquire co-living deals. Deals in general, but the way I do it for co-living, I guess. Let's see. Okay, Paul, great question. Of the last 10 properties purchased, how many have been purchased on MLS and how many purchased from wholesale sub 2? Great question, brother. If you know anything about me, you understand leverage is a big part of super investing. Leverage in every aspect, leveraging effective leverage of time, effective leverage of capital, effective leverage of everything. Why I have my systems and processes and team members and the way I acquire deals, all that good stuff. It's a fundamental element for super investing because it allows you to achieve your goals faster with less of your own effort being dedicated on every area. And then you focus your effort on the most important things to grow and scale your business. So with that being said, of the last 10 properties, 9 of 10, and that's almost always the case, is purchased through wholesalers. It's almost always purchased through wholesalers, especially because I'm buying creatively financed deals. So like virtually all the deals that I've bought, cash or creative, of the last 10 have all been creative, and that's by design. It's not the best use of my time to go on the market to find a traditional financed property, right? Like the house that I said, and I could only buy traditionally financed or do all that negotiations and all that. I am more than glad to pay wholesalers and bird dogs for sifting through the dozens, if not hundreds, of potential investments out or properties out there for sale, figuring out which ones are open to creative, and then I decide which of those I want to further analyze and buy, right? That's a better use of my time because other things can be done by other people. But at the end of the day, I have to decide how I'm going to effectively analyze my deals and which deals I decide to buy, right? That's up to me for my business. You can't put that in someone else's hands. If you do, you're literally putting one of the two most important parts of your entire real estate business and the success of it in someone else's hands who's not you, right? There's a lot of things you can outsource. That's not one of the things you should outsource, is which deal should you buy, right? That is your responsibility as a real estate investor. If you don't want to do that, you probably shouldn't invest in real estate, or you better be paying someone who has a lot of great skills. You better be paying someone who has a lot of great skills to do that for you. And that's an avenue a lot of people do. Great question. Phenomenal question. We didn't even talk about the acquisition strategies. I can potentially do that as well. So let's go to the next one. I don't even know which of these is right. What's your favorite co-living investing strategy? I'll put the word financing in here so we're clear. Might even be the same thing I'm showing twice. All right. So the next one. What's my favorite way to buy co-living? So like, what's my favorite financing strategy? Like, I've already explained it multiple times, but I want to be very clear about it. I have been able to achieve what I've been able to do in the time frame that I have because of super investment, like my super investing strategy, which also includes certain tools, resources, systems, and all that to maximize my results. But it starts with my core investing strategy, right? The super investing strategy, called cheat code, blueprint, whatever the hell you want to call it, 3 C's. I don't know. People call it all these different things. Just cool when people give me random names for it. But I buy my properties for co-living as the core management strategy. Almost all my deals over the last 2 years have been co-living. I'm buying the vast majority of those creatively financed, and I'm raising all the money on every single deal that I buy. Every single one, regardless of how much money I have, I'm always raising money to buy my deals, and my money goes elsewhere, right? It's a core part of me being able to know that I can buy any single investment that is a great deal anytime that I want because I can raise the money for those deals. You have to have that mindset if your goal is scalability. I'm not saying you need hundreds of properties, but even if you want 5 or 10, let's say you want 10 properties to produce you $10,000 a month of cash flow, right? You want $120,000 a year, $10,000 a month of cash flow to be financially free. Well, let's say every single property costs you $100,000 to acquire, renovate, furnish, and have reserves for it. 10 properties at $100,000 each is $1 million. The vast majority of people in general will not be able to earn and save enough in a reasonable amount of time frame to be able to have $1 million to invest to build a portfolio to become financially free. It's going to be faster than doing it through the stock market because it's higher returns, but you're going to need to be able to raise money, even little bits of it, to be able to achieve your goals. And I say that understanding that there's a lot of people that I help who have a significant salary or tons of reserves. They're in a different position, right? The vast majority of people, I think I saw that like less than 18% of our country, of the US, makes $100,000 or more. With that being said, right, you're going to have a very hard time. Even 10 years of $100,000 earned is not even $1 million because you pay taxes on that, right? And then you have to use that money to live. So if you're saving 20%, which is higher than the vast majority of people, you save 20% of what you've earned. So you're saving $20,000 a year. It'll take you 50 years to save enough to have $1 million to invest to buy your 10 property portfolio. I'm excluding little things like the cash flow generated and reinvesting it and all that other stuff and equity and what, but the concept holds nonetheless. And a lot of you guys have very nice lifestyle goals and want a lot more than $10,000 a month, right? You want 10, 15, 20, 10,000's on your lower end. I don't know who we are that we think that, we should deserve passive, not deserve, but like that your minimal goal is to make more each year passively while also building wealth than 80+% of our country, right? You deserve that if you want to put in the work. I make plenty more than that, right? I'm saying you deserve it, but like your minimum to feel any benefit from it is that amount. It's kind of crazy, right? When you think about it. That's why I focus my goals on my spending, right? And that's a better goal than just an arbitrary number. I've gone over detailed trainings for that, and it's included in the Real Estate Freedom Roadmap with that in there. All right. So my favorite ways to buy co-living. I've already given you the full strategy, but let me share with you. Perfect. My favorite ways to buy co-living. Well, let me explain the 2 ways you finance your investments, right? There's, let me see if there's one before this. Oh, actually, look at this. Perfect timing. I'm telling you, this is all sequential, and the way I try to speak is sequential. This literally goes over a lot of this stuff, and how I find deals. This answers the question that was asked by Paul. Literally, I acquired 90% of my deals from wholesalers and who focus on creative finance. So it's not just wholesalers, but wholesalers that focus on creative finance. I literally explain why here. Like this is all in the Co-Living Freedom community, literally laid out step by step and all the tools and resources to make this possible for you. All right, fair ways to buy co-living. So move this stinking banner. All right. Financing is basically like there's two components of acquiring real estate. There is, let's see if I have. Okay, cool. So there's the entry costs to get into the deal and the financing, which is the majority of it. So basically, your entry costs are the cost it would take to cover the acquisition costs. So if there's down payments, wholesaler fees, agent fees, and whatever, right? Money has to be paid up front. The cost to renovate and furnish the property, if you're going the co-living route or whatever, to get it to the condition you need for management. And then any reserves you need and carrying costs. Like, so it's going to take you 2 months to renovate and furnish. You're going to need at least 2 months of utilities and all that stuff that you have to pay, the mortgage, all that, you're going to have to pay all that, plus another 30 to 60 days to cover filling up the house before it's profitable. So you need money to acquire it upfront, to renovate and furnish it, and then any carrying costs and reserves for that property. Whether you're buying traditional, creative, whatever, you need that. Well, the rest of it, right, if it's a $400,000 purchase and your entry costs are $100,000, let's say $50,000 of that is the down payment. So that means there's $350,000 of loan left. $400,000 minus a $50,000 down payment, there's $350,000 of loan. That loan, that financing could either be traditional or creative. If you were to buy it all cash, there's no loan left, so there's no financing. It's just part of your acquisition, right? That $350,000 be part of your entry cost if you're buying it cash, and there's no financing. Most people should not do that. I mean, either you have tons of money and you like to waste it, or not benefit from real estate the best way, right? Which is leverage. That's one of the best things about real estate that differentiates it from any other strategy out there. For, just a percentage of the property value, you can have full ownership of it and generate returns from it. If you're buying cash, you're losing all that, but you're reducing your risk, whatever. And that's not true either, but you have two main financing paths: traditional financing, creative financing, right? Traditional financing, bank loans, like conventional loans, DSCR loans, commercial loans, whatever. You go to a bank or a lender, a traditional lender that gives you a loan, and they tell you what the terms are. They're going to say, hey, we need 15, 20, 30% down payment to buy this thing. You're going to need to have solid credit. Here's some specific loan requirements. Like if it's a DSCR loan, they need to make sure the property will generate as much enough rental income to cover the like you need to meet the DSCR ratio. You need to make sure that the income is a certain amount over, or at least a 1-to-1 ratio, but at least a certain amount over the debt servicing, right? The loan payments, taxes, insurance, that kind of stuff. Creative financing is different. Instead of going to a bank who's telling you the terms that they will offer you, they'll say, hey, 25% down payment, give you 8% interest rate, and then you have to meet these qualifications. Well, creative financing allows you to not work with banks and instead to work directly with the sellers to structure a deal that makes sense for all parties. For example, subject to, I'm able to buy a property subject to its existing mortgage. That means I pay the seller whatever they need up front, and then I take over their existing loan. This is very advantageous when they have little to no equity. And it's like I get to put $10,000 down to buy a $400,000 property. That's awesome. That's a very low down payment, right? $10,000 out of $400,000. I don't even know how to do that math right now in my head. Let's see. 10,000 divided by, all right, a 2.5% down payment. All right, I was going to say that, but I didn't want to be wrong. 2.5% down payment to buy this house in that situation because they had little to no equity that you cashed out. And more importantly, if they bought this property before 2022, before 2023, you're more than likely buying this property with a very low interest rate. You're buying it at a lot of my properties subject to my lowest is like 2.25%, plenty in the twos, mid to high twos, plenty in the low threes, mid threes, high threes, 4%. I even have some that are 5 or 6%, but the entry cost, the down payment was so low that it still made a lot of sense as opposed to taking out a new loan where I have to put 20+% down and go through all those requirements. Subject to is nice because you can buy properties with much lower equity or a much lower down payment because they have less equity, and you take over really great debts that are already multiple years into its loan payment, which means more of your money is paying down the loan as opposed to being wasted on interest. That's why that's very advantageous. Seller finance means instead of going to finance it through a bank who tells you what the terms are, you and the seller can agree on terms that make sense. You agree on the purchase price, you agree on the down payment, dollar amount, percentage, you agree on the payments of the loan, right? If it's $350,000 loan remaining, right? You do a $50,000 down payment for the $400,000 house. Well, that $350,000 loan isn't like the bank who says, hey, 8% interest rate. It's literally you and the seller. If you guys agree on 4%, 2%, a lot of mine 0%. If you agree on things like deferred payments for a year or two. So I've got plenty, the house I'm living in, we deferred the whole first year of payments. There were no payments on the seller finance for a full year. On top of that, it's 0% interest. It's principal payment only. And it's only $1,000 a month for the seller finance, which is even less than what it would be as a 0% loan. So we're even paying less. Like, it's amazing because it's the seller we're working with. We're solving his problem. And this worked out for him. It worked out for us. Everyone was happy because it's the seller and you agreeing on terms that make sense for both parties, not dictating it through not the bank telling you exactly what it is and then going through that cumbersome financing process. And then hybrid is a combination of there's some loan you're taking over that was existing, subject to. Some of it is seller finance. Whatever is not paid up front is seller finance. That's actually this exact house. We took over $1 million of loan. I'm in California, right? So it's nothing. $1 million. It's not nothing, but you know what I mean? $1 million at a 3% interest rate or 2.99% interest rate, which saves me thousands of dollars a month if I went to a bank to get the same loan at 7-8% at this time, plus a way lower down payment. And the remainder that was financed was at 0%, $1,000 monthly payments, no payments for a year. That's a combination of combining subject to and seller finance that is hybrid, right? Instead of subject to where you're paying out all of the equity up front, you can also finance some of that equity, making payments on it over time and sell all up front. The reason why I prefer creative financing above everything else is I'm a numbers guy. It allows me to buy properties with much lower money down, with much lower interest rates, which means I get to increase my monthly cash flow. My profit each month is much higher if I'm paying less each month. And because I put way less money in to buy the deal, my cash on cash return is higher. The return on my investment, how much I have to put in to buy the deal, is much better because I put less money in to buy the deal. And on top of that, I'm also getting more monthly profit than I would have otherwise. My cash flow is higher. My cash on cash return is higher. If I lost you here, great. That's why my free Real Estate Freedom Roadmap community, you can understand this in extreme detail with my free calculator trainings and all that stuff to explain this to you in more detail than I can right now. So my favorite way is creative financing. On top of that, because I don't have to deal with banks and I don't have to deal with the cumbersome process of, they got to do all these verifications and checks and this and that, which takes time and energy and effort that could be spent on finding more deals or raising more money. I'm able to be more scalable. I can buy a lot more properties that are creatively financed than I could through traditional financing. It's just a fact. I go into much more detail the various ways of financing strategies. Not even the time for this. But the compare contrast. The cool thing about traditional financing is I can go on Zillow right now and say, okay, if I wanted to, as long as I met the lender requirements and had the down payments and all that stuff, I can buy any single property listed here, these 102 listed here, as long as the seller agrees to my purchase price, right? And typically, if they have a purchase price of $398 and I give them $398 and I got my financing lined up, we're good. They'll let me buy the house, right? You can do that with any of these. That is a major advantage of traditional financing versus creative, because of these 102, maybe 5, maybe 10 of them, let's say 10% of them will be willing to sell it creatively, but you have to go through 102 to find that 10%, which is what wholesalers do, which is why I buy my deals from wholesalers. But then I make those deals even better because I understand how to analyze deals effectively and restructure them as win-win scenarios for the wholesaler, myself, there's bird dogs involved, for the sellers, for everyone involved. Because as long as I get my returns, I'm happy to make it work for everyone else, right? But if it doesn't meet my returns, that's not a problem either. I'm just not going to be the buyer for it. That's cool too. So you can buy any single property that meets the financing requirements. Sellers, a lot of sellers want all that money up front. That's why 90% of them will say, no, I don't want creative, because they want all that money up front, or they don't want to hold a note or whatever. So that means it's a cleaner exit. They're done. They sell it, they get their money, they're done, they move on. Well, the cons for us as buyers is that it means we have to pay much higher down payments and much higher interest rates. There are a lot of strict lending criteria, and it's much slower, especially if you're trying to finance a co-living property. And this really limits your scalability, because you're putting way more money. Like if I can put a third of the amount for creative versus traditional, I can buy 3 more properties with the same amount of money, right? And they each benefit me and get much higher returns. And I don't have to go through the long 30+ day cycle, 20 to 45 day cycle with a lender to get everything done to be able to buy a property. I can close on a deal by the end of the week easily if close of escrow is available at that point. Well, creative financing, why I prefer this: lower down payments and interest rates. So it allows for much more flexible terms. There's no banks involved, so it's much faster closings, right? You still go through title, but there's no banks. So that lender, that process with the lender and underwriter and all these other things and all these verifications and all that is eliminated. That saves weeks of extra effort and appraisals going wrong and this and that. It's very scalable, and it's very easy to raise money on these deals, not only because the returns are higher, but because there's no bank asking where the money's coming from and this, and it's not even an issue. The cons, like I said, of the 100 properties we saw, maybe 10% of those might work for creative. And then of the 10% that we saw, maybe only 1 or maybe 10% of those, 1 or 20%, 1 or 2 of those properties will actually be good investments, right? So you have 100 properties in that area, 10% of them might be open to creative, and let's say 20% of those are actually good deals, right? So that's 2 of the 100 that you might actually be able to buy. So there's a lot of work to be done to find those deals, those 10, and then to further analyze and see which of those 2 actually makes sense. So it requires motivated sellers. It's more limited inventory. You're buying properties near market value. I don't know why I said value, but you're buying it close to the property value, because you're typically not buying it at a discount creatively. You're just buying it at a discount, not on the purchase price. You're buying it at a discount on how much you're paying each month. That's kind of the idea there. You're paying much less each month. You're putting much less down, typically at the cost of buying a property near what it's worth. That's a perfect trade-off for a buy and hold investor. That's literally the best thing. How can I maximize my cash flow and the least amount of money down, even if it means I have to buy a $400,000 property for $400,000? Awesome. And you need a level of experience to understand. Yeah, I might have lost some of you guys, right? To understand sub-2, seller finance, hybrid, how to analyze, where to get these deals, how to analyze these deals. I lay it all out for you guys in this, and then further double, triple, quadruple down it in super investors, whole other mastermind community of mine. But this should give you a lot of insight into this to address the question that was asked. This is a little example table that I provided during my co-living in-person workshop, which is also a key component of the trainings for the community, but it's for the co-living freedom community. Basically, it's taking the same $400,000 property to just make it visually more understandable. You're taking that same $400,000 property. If you're buying cash, right, your down payment is the full $400,000. It's 100% down payment. You're putting that $400,000 down. So if you're buying it with no financing, the cash flow is going to be very high because there's no monthly payments. But you spent $469,000 to get into the deal, right? $400,000 down payment and then $69,000 in closing costs, renovations, furnishing. So although your cash flow is really high, your return on investment, your cash on cash return, right, your cash flow divided by entry cost is 7.8%. Well, if we were to do traditional financing, buy that same property for $400,000 through a bank, and they say, hey, we require a 25% down payment and we'll do a 7.5% interest rate on the $300,000 loan. Well, your monthly payment on that loan is $2,098. So of course, because there's $2,098 of loan payments, your cash flow is $2,098 less than if you just bought it cash. But you also put way less money in the deal. So is it a better or worse deal? Well, that's what the cash on cash return tells you. You're getting $968 a month with these terms. It costs you $173,747 to get into the deal with the down payment, the closing costs, with all that other stuff. It's a 6.6% cash on cash return. It was actually better to buy it cash. Most people don't have almost $500,000 to buy a property cash, nor would I recommend you do that. I would just avoid this deal entirely, either of these ways. Well, if I bought it subject to, and the down payment was the amount of equity the seller had, which was $75,897. I paid it all up front. The rest is financed, right? Subject to its existing loan terms, which was 3%. My monthly payments are, even though the loan amount is larger than my loan amount with traditional because it's less money down, because the interest rate is so much lower, my monthly payment is actually like $500-$600 less. So my cash flow is that amount, $600 more. So more cash flow because the interest rate is lower, even though the loan amount is higher. And my entry costs are also lower. Between my cash flow going up and my entry costs going down, hence why I love creative financing, this same deal I could buy traditionally and have a 6.6% cash on cash return is double that now, 12.7% cash on cash return, right? So if I did seller financing and instead of saying, hey, I'll cash out your full equity, they own it outright in this scenario and they're willing to finance it with a 10% down payment, so even lower down payment, which means my loan amount is higher, and they wanted a higher interest rate, 4%. Well, my loan payment is higher because my loan amount is higher and my interest rate is higher. So my loan payment is higher, bigger loan balance, higher interest rate, larger loan payment. So my cash flow is lower, right? My income is the same for all these properties, 6110 minus the loan payment is my loan payment and other expenses that are the same for every single one of these. My cash flow is lower, but because my down payment was lower, even though my cash flow was lower, because my down payment was lower, this is actually a better deal because my cash on cash return is higher. Hopefully that makes sense to you. This is why it's hard to say, is it worth, is it better or worse to put more down payment or whatever? It's hard to say that because you have to analyze the deal. There's some rules of thumb, but you have to analyze the deal for it to make sense. Usually, lower down payment, even at a marginal increase in monthly payment, right? If it's a lower interest rate, it's almost always better for your cash on cash return. Less money down up front, even though you're going to pay a little bit more monthly at a low interest rate, is almost always better. It's not always the case, but it's almost always better if you want a rule of thumb. That is exactly what this hybrid scenario shows. So of the $400,000, the $75,897 of equity, while you're taking over their existing $324,000 loan, you're paying $20,000 up front, and the rest is seller finance. So the combination of the 324 and the what is that? 380 minus whatever the remaining amount is, seller financed at a blended interest rate, 3% of this amount, 4% of this amount. Your monthly payment is $1,742, right? Because your loan payments are higher. It's a small seller finance plus this existing one, so it's a smaller amount of this added to this is $1,742. So your monthly payments are higher because there's two financing you're paying, the subject to and the seller finance, but you put way less down, which is the advantage. In this example, your cash flow is even lower than the subject to or seller finance, but your down payment or your entry costs were much lower, right? Because your down payment is only $20,000 in this scenario. Well, that's the best one in this scenario. You can't know if this is going to be right or wrong unless you analyze the deal fully, like which one's a better scenario. You have to analyze it, but it becomes very easy because the income is the income, the expenses are the expenses. All you're adjusting for now is the debt and then the down payment associated with it. That's it. It's all you have to focus on. That's how you compare these. That's how I compared all this stuff. This is a 16.8% cash on cash return. So when people ask me, Michael, how is it that you're consistently buying properties that are 15%, even 20, almost 30% cash on cash return? How? Because I'm buying co-living properties that are maximizing my rental income. I am buying them creatively financed, which is lowering my down payments. Hence, you see the benefit there. And I'm also lowering my monthly payments because the financing is almost always, it should always be better than traditional. So I get lower down payment, lower interest rates, even though, well, in this instance, my cash flow is higher because this 7.5%, even at a lower loan amount. Just look at this. 7.5%, $300,000 is $2,000 monthly payment. Well, a $380,000 loan at 3.3% is $1,742. You understand the power? This is an $80,000 less loan, but this interest rate has such a huge impact on this lower loan amount that you're paying more monthly for this one than you are for this one. And the process of traditional is more cumbersome. Am I saying you shouldn't buy properties traditionally? No, I'm just saying, understand this is the reality of it. I think a lot of people should start that way. I even advocate in my Co-Living Freedom community that a lot of people can do it. A lot of people make it work. It's just a little bit more difficult to actually scale this way. And you're going to get typically lower returns. But the advantage is there's way more opportunities because you can make an offer on any of those 102 properties that we saw instead of the 10% of those, the 10 of those that might potentially work, right? So that's the trade-off. For me, I'd rather get better deals, not more deals, right? When people ask, what my overall goal is, why I do things the way that I do it, is my whole goal is to get the most amount of return with the least amount of investments, and ideally the least amount of money invested and effort invested. That's why I buy turnkey co-living properties, creatively financed. And then on top of that, I am further benefited from raising the capital because, like I said, it would take me 20, 30, 40 plus years. I've given my example. It would have taken me 40 plus years to have earned, not just save, but earn the amount of money it would take to build my current portfolio today that I've done in less than 5 years. And the coolest part is I'm constantly still building. So that number is always increasing. The amount of money I've used to invest, my portfolio building is always increasing, regardless of how much money I am earning and saving myself, because I've developed this skill set of capital raising. That's the third tier, right? It's super investors. Most of you guys just need to focus on deals, finding them, analyzing them, understanding why I buy them the way that I do so that you can do the same, whether you are focused on active income, wholesaling and bird dogging for people, right? For buyers. If you are someone who wants to passively invest, well, should you passively invest in a traditional co-living versus creative co-living? Well, hopefully the numbers show why one is typically much better than the other, and you'd put less money in to be a partner on those deals. Or should you invest in long-term versus co-living? Like, hopefully this kind of paints the picture. Really just think of the $100 versus thousands of dollars of cash flow. And you're able to buy bigger, better properties. We didn't talk about the wealth building. We didn't talk about any of these other components that make co-living so much better. I've got like 50 co-living master classes for you to watch. Plus, they're also in the free Real Estate Freedom Roadmap where I go into the weeds of that kind of stuff. But hopefully this really explained. Let's see what my financing recommendation. So I really try to explain everything to people. The way I like to educate is I explain it and how, like, what the various options are, how I view them, try to be fairly objective, and then provide my recommendation on everything. Why, my strategy, my financing, the way I renovate, why I renovate the way that I do, how I fund my properties, like everything, how I choose to operate. That's literally how this entire structure is. Show you the various things, explain each of them for you, and then provide what my recommendation is and what I'm actually doing as well. Because what I might recommend to you if you're newer might be different than what I am doing today as someone who is like, it'd be very difficult for me to say, hey, go do co-living. If you have no experience at all, go do co-living deals. You should be doing co-living deals no matter what, but co-living deals that are only creatively financed, only using other people's money. Like, that might be impossible for you right now. You might have to use your own money. You might have to buy something traditionally. Like, I understand that not everyone is in the same skills, experience, risk tolerance, financial resources and reserves that I have to be able to acquire deals at the scale that I do, the way that I do. I get that. That's why I provide what I do and what I recommend. So I use creative financing to scale faster, buy better deals, and reduce my entry costs. But I still use traditional financing when it makes sense, just like I do BRRRR sometimes when it makes sense. If you can master both, you can close almost any great deal regardless of what's happening in the economy. For example, when interest rates were lower, I was buying a lot more deals traditionally, and I was doing BRRRR strategy more. When interest rates are higher and properties are really high prices, as they are now, we're kind of in the worst of both. High prices, high interest rates. Well, creative is not even comparable. But if I'm buying properties when it's 4% interest rates here traditionally, and I get to open up my pool of deals because instead of buying 10, I could buy 100, well, I'm more likely going that route, right? Like, or if it's a hot seller's market and no one's willing to offer creative, or a lot less people are willing to because they can just sell it above asking value very quickly, well, creative is less viable in that scenario. So you have to understand how to do both in theory, but it's not very difficult to understand either if you dedicate yourself to learning this stuff. Obviously, I'm biased, but that's what the whole point of the Co-Living Freedom Community is, to expedite the entire journey for you for a low monthly cost, and you get to get all the tools, resources, and everything step by step for you. Plus, like this, for every single part of this journey, explain everything, tell you my recommendation, what I'm doing. And then when starting out, I think focusing on understanding investing in traditional loans is a great starting place. Connecting with lenders, seeing what terms they provide for both regular rentals and co-living rentals is a great place to start. And practicing deal analysis, where when you're buying deals traditionally, and then seeing if creative is possible, just to compare and contrast, is very advantageous. All right, cool. I tell you how to work with DSCR lenders and all that stuff. I hope we've gone through in extreme detail to answer your guys' two key questions about how I buy and convert co-living rentals, right? Very simply, I primarily buy my properties as turnkey, ready-to-go houses that I add non-load-bearing walls and convert common areas into additional bedrooms, It's the fastest way to cash flow. It's the least amount of risk, and it allows me to buy properties that are creatively financed, and it's just optimal and very scalable. And when it comes to financing my deals, I almost always prefer creative financing. There is market dependency if interest rates are low. I open up the door to more traditional financing, but it's almost always better to go creative because I get lower down payments, lower interest rates, which means more cash flow and higher cash on cash returns. But the downside is there's just less deals that people are willing to sell creatively than traditionally. That's why I recommend the vast majority of you to analyze deals traditionally, first and foremost, to develop the skill set of looking at deals, understanding how many rooms can be added, developing your local market network resources, understanding what potential income can make sense for that property, and then just comparing, contrasting the debt difference to see this is what it is traditionally, this is what it could be creatively. And for those of you who join my Co-Living Freedom community, it's pretty sick, right? So I have it right here, right? The superinvestors.com/start co-living, I think is what it is. You can literally sign up for it. You can sign up for it in my, let's see. You can sign up for it very easily. If you're already in my Real Estate Freedom Roadmap community, it looks just like this. You would go, you're not in it. You can unlock with premium, unlock, and then sign up right then and there, get full access to everything, right? Immediately breaking all this stuff down for you with all the tools and resources and everything, all there for you. You can just do that immediately and get access to all this stuff. And I hope I answered your guys' questions very intentionally, giving you what I hope everyone does is have some form of critical thinking into understanding what are the various ways to do this strategy, what are the various ways to convert, like the renovation, what are the various ways to finance, what are the various ways to fund, and then weigh out the options, understand the math behind it, and then actually execute on those. But I provide my recommendations to you and what I'm doing so you understand as well what is possible and what you might just skip towards. But that's literally I've already done a lot of this work several years ago where I decided and created my Super Investor Blueprint. I already decided co-living beats any single other asset out there. Like single family homes are better than any other asset for financial freedom in a short time frame because it's way less time, effort, risk, and speed to actually be able to acquire those deals and build a cash flow than it is to find an RV park, find a multifamily, whatever. Those have long-term dividends, but they're not going to make you financially free quickly. And the competition and knowledge it takes to do that is much more difficult. So it just takes longer and it's harder. Not saying it's impossible, but it just takes longer and it's harder. And then when we talk about single family homes, great. Well, co-living dominates short-term, mid-term, and long-term rentals. Just, it's not even comparable. And I've got full trainings on that and I explain it in the community as well, but I've got full trainings on that as well in the co-living community, as well as on YouTube for you to watch why and comparing and contrasting those things. And then when it comes to buying co-living deals, the way to renovate and convert those deals, right? Laying those various options to the way I'm going to buy it, various ways to do it, right? Creative, traditional, how I'm going to finance it. And then my renovation, the plan for that, what types of properties I'm looking for, how I'm finding them, all that stuff. I try to lay all that out step by step for you guys in this community to help you guys out. If you're not in a position to join and invest that, I get it. No worries. Like, it's not the point of this. That's why I provide so much of this for free as well. Piece it together or take advantage of all the free stuff that I do. For 90% of the stuff in that community is for free. Tools, resources, education. Take advantage of that. Get to a place in which you can afford to join. I mean, it's currently $197 a month, right? Like, you probably shouldn't be buying real estate if that is a huge hindrance for you right now. I'm saying that because if you're going to have more than $200 a month problems potentially coming on your property, you need to be able to safely and comfortably solve that. But if you're already got decent active income or you're trying to increase your active income, it's beneficial for you as a bird dog or wholesaler to get this stuff way better laid out for you. If you're a capital partner and you're going to invest $100, $150, $200,000 with someone to partially own a deal, well, it's probably worth the investment to better understand this and be able to be safer when you're doing it. And if you're trying to buy and hold real estate, you better have at least that much money that you can comfortably invest in this if it's the right fit for you, right? Don't do it. But if it's the right fit for you, so you can buy better deals with less risk, more quickly, with higher returns, all that stuff, that's the whole point of it, right? Hopefully it benefits you all. So with that, I think we've answered, let's see. We got friends from AZ. Me and family want to buy a house sometime this year. Would you think the interest rates will drop? I live in LA. I don't know. I don't know, because everyone thinks Trump and the the Fed chair lowering rates directly lowers interest rates for buying houses, but that's not always how it works. Just because they lower the rate doesn't mean that the actual housing interest rate lowers. There's a lot more factors to it than that. So I would assume if I was betting on it, probably either it's gonna be flat or lower. I don't think it's going up. I can tell you that much. So it's probably flat, and if it goes lower, maybe. But in my opinion, it put us in a bad position as a country to unnecessarily lower interest rates right now, because that is our way to solve when recessions happen and all that, like to stimulate activity and velocity of money is to lower interest rates so people are using their money more and I think it would also lead to more inflation. So I'm not gonna get too far in the weeds. I think it wouldn't be best for our country if they do that. But if they do that and interest rates go down, shit, even better for someone like me who has a big portfolio, because those property values go up massively. My property values will go up massively. Inflation will probably go up massively, but the more money you make, the less inflation affects you, because inflation is a consumer tax. Inflation is paid primarily at the point of sale, and that affects people who make less money and has a lower and lower impact the more money you have. So for me and people who have a lot more than me, who have assets, have more money, it's only to our benefit if interest rates go down. For the vast majority of people who make less money or have little to no assets, it's a massive disadvantage, even though it seems like, oh, cool, I can buy a property at 4.5% interest rate versus 6.5% interest rate, my payments go down. Understand, more than likely, property prices will go up at the same time if that occurs. And you're going to be paying a lot more for everything else if inflation follows that. So I'm not like one of those speculative guys there. It's not how I make any of my decisions. I don't make decisions speculating on what will happen in interest rates and all that kind of stuff, or who's going to do what tariff and all that. I understand the market for what it is right now, and I do the best form of investing I can, given everything that's going on right now, right? Like I said, traditional, Burr, creative, the way I do creative, all these different things, right? I am not rigid. I do what makes the exact most sense for the market based on the numbers that we're in right now. And that's it. And understand that if you own assets, it is always to your advantage when interest rates go down, because then you can refinance and pull money out. Your property values will go up in value, and inflation will further increase the value of assets and will affect people who make less and have less much more. This is why people think I'm a little weird as a super capitalist, served our country very much that as a first generation American, but I'm very much a conscious capitalist. I don't want the vast majority, the 82% that make less than 100,000 a year, or the vast majority of people who don't own any assets, to be completely further burdened, and the middle class to shrink further, or more people to be in the lowest class. I don't want that as a society. That's how the Roman Empire fell apart. That's how all these things go crazy. And I'm not going to get too much more into the weeds of that kind of stuff, but I am prepared no matter what happens in the market. And that's what I implore you guys to do. And if you're trying to buy a house, why even do, the advantage of buying it traditionally, if it's a house you're going to live in, VA loan, FHA loan, conventional loan, so 5%, 3.5%, 0% down payments to buy that property. But that's regardless of the interest rate, right? You can do that right now, regardless of the interest rate. And if it does go down, the interest rates go down, or the property values go up, great. You can refinance it, right? And lower the interest rate. You can do a rate and term refi, just lower the interest rate. Property values go up, cool. You can change the debt or fully refinance it, pull money out if the property values go up. I'm not the kind of guy to wait to buy real estate. I figure out what works and do it as long as it makes sense by the numbers. And I implore you to be in that position as much as possible. That's how you are an active investor versus reacting to everything else. That is the secret of literally all this stuff, is being active and intentional and understanding and making the most of any given market, as opposed to waiting for something. But a lot of times I buy properties creatively anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Even my own house, right? I could have bought it traditionally. I could have bought, it was 1.4 million. I could have bought it traditionally, could have done a 5% down payment, right? As a conventional loan. We could have put, had 7.5% interest rate. I'd be paying thousands of dollars more a month, but it'd be a low down payment, paying thousands of dollars more in interest. But instead, I structured it creatively. But there's the dozens that didn't work out creatively to get this one. There's the year of negotiating in and out to get to this point, right? So it's more difficult, but the returns are there. Or if you're really going to buy it conventionally, understand, is it worth it or not, another percentage or two when you could refinance in the future? Or if interest rates go up, great, at least you locked in low. If it goes down, great, you can refinance it. That's my thought. The only difference here is if you think property values are going to drop massively, and if you're waiting for interest rates to go down, that's not going to drop property prices. That's going to accelerate the hot sellers market again. That's that. Paul Harris. All right, last question for the day. I love your questions because you seem like a buyer. Paul and Harris. Like, let's get on a call probably. You might actually be a good fit for super investors depending on where you're at. But wholesalers in my area, what percentage of their deals are turnkey properties? Where I'm at, wholesalers are almost usually have distressed properties or in areas that don't work for co-living. You're right, because you're being reactionary, not proactive the way that I just mentioned. And you don't know this stuff. No one, unless someone tells you this, you don't actually know that this is what you're doing. You are dictating the deals that you're willing to look at based on your market, based on what wholesalers are sending you, instead of being very intentional and saying, hey, I'm going to choose the markets I invest in because these are the best markets economically for co-living. So I know these are the core markets I'm going to focus on. And then instead of saying, hey, wholesaler, send what you got, I'm curating to the right wholesalers. I want to buy turnkey creative wholesale deals, but I need to talk to wholesalers that are primarily finding creatively financed deals. Whether it's turnkey or not, that's up to me to look at. But if I'm talking to cash wholesalers, I can't be surprised when cash deals are primarily for fix and flips and for burrs that they're super distressed, right? And they're cash. If it's a cash deal, it's typically super distressed, which is why they're selling for cash at a discount. Well, if you want to buy and hold a property that is getting you, that is more turnkey or creative finance, you got to talk to people who are finding turnkey creative deals and in the markets that you want to be investing in, not just saying, hey, they're not sending it to me in my market, or they're sending it this way. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong or right. I'm just giving you the guidance, because for me, no matter what happens in any part of my investing journey, plenty of good, plenty of bad, it always starts with extreme accountability. If I don't have enough of the right leads or enough leads, or if my deals are not underwriting well, or whatever it is, something doesn't pan out, I always reflect back on what could I have done differently? What could I do differently to either get more of the right things coming my way? Is it that I need to expand to also include another market? Do I need to talk to more potential wholesalers? Do I need to talk to better wholesalers? Do I need to start training some bird dogs to also talk to several wholesalers? Do I need, what is it that I need to do differently that can change this, rather than just waiting and waiting and waiting, only because my desire was and still is to achieve all my results as quickly and efficiently as possible. So you can't do that reactionary to interest rates. You can't do that reactionary to market conditions, to what people are sending you, to what you have to be the curator, the dictator of all that. It's ultimately up to you. So hopefully that helps give you some guidance on what to do. So if anyone thinks that super investing, like getting all this, not just the co-living, but the co-living, the scale deal finding, like the way we find deals, how we analyze deals, super deal analysis, capital raising, you want all the systems, tools, resources, the step-by-step guidance for all of that. Well, that is the super investor community. So I'm dropping the link in there if you'd like to apply, but don't apply if you're not in a position in which you can, if you have at least $20,000+ in reserves and or real estate experience. Like, if you don't have that, you're not a good fit for super investors. However, I want to help you get to that point where it does make sense for you through the very low cost co-living community, a tiny fraction of the cost of any other person out there offering co-living education. And I provide tons of stuff for free too. So wherever you're at, I hope I am helping you progress up the financial freedom roadmap. Why my free community is now the real estate freedom roadmap, to quite literally help you progress up. If you have time, money, resources, wherever you're at, help you as much as I can and make it as affordable as I can for the value that you're getting compared to anywhere else, anything else, plus provide way better delivery, because I am an engineer. I am systematized. I am step-by-step. I am systems-based. That can all plug in. It's not about education anymore. It's about education, but clear education with action items and the systems, tools, and resources to directly plug into your business. That's what you need. So if you need to plug in, you want to plug into the Super Investor operating system, which provides you the deal, capital, and operations systems to plug and play into your business. Well, that's what the Super Investors community is for. If you're just on the focus of co-living right now, and that's a very important fundamental part of all this stuff, traditionally, creatively, your own money, cap raising, whatever, that's a fundamental key of what's worked extremely well and will continue to work extremely well. Probably will only work even better as the economy continues going the way that it is. That's why the co-living community exists. That's why it's a tiny fraction of the cost, because my super investors essentially subsidize that for you guys. They make it so that you guys get lower cost access to it and the live support calls, all the tools and resources at lower cost, but they're not hurting. They also get to benefit from that, and they get massive additional benefits for what they signed up for. So appreciate you guys. I thank you guys. I hope you guys have a awesome rest of your week.